Judge Gabrielle Wolohojian will be the newest justice on the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court after winning overwhelming support from the Governor's Council, the elected body charged with vetting and confirming judicial nominees. But her confirmation wasn't without controversy, because during her hearing, the council failed to press Wolohojian on a key ethics question she'll face on the bench: how to handle cases involving her former longtime partner, Governor Maura Healey. Joining me to discuss are President of the Massachusetts Bar Association, Damian Turco, and Commonwealth Beacon reporter, Gin Dumchus. Thanks to you both for being here. Gin, I want to start with you, because I know you covered the hearing and the vote on the newest SJC Justice, Judge Wolohojian. And during that hearing, one of the counselors referred to her past romantic relationship with the governor as the elephant in the room. Was that the atmosphere? How did it go when this question came up?
Sure. Well, she ended up being the lone vote and the one expressing discomfort with the situation. I think everybody agreed that Justice Wolohojian was incredibly well qualified for the role. I think there was a desire for more discussion, at least on the outside, more than the inside, about the context of it. And, you know, I covered the first SJC nomination made by Governor Healey, and I covered the second one with Wolohojian. And it was very much a tale of two nomination hearings. The Governor's Council pressed Bessie DeWar about her lack of judicial experience. She hadn't been a judge before, which is not really new for the Supreme Judicial Court. Margaret Marshall, the Chief Justice, former Chief Justice, didn't have experience as a judge either, but they very much pressed her about that. And when it came to Wolohojian and stuff that people had been talking about, they largely shied away from it. So this was a Governor's Council that did not want to engage in, as one counselor out of 7 called it the elephant in the room.
And Damian, what do you think? Should this be part of the discussion? Is there a legitimate question around whether a high court judge, how she'd handle having had a past relationship with the governor, a past romantic relationship?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show, Katie. I mean, my feeling on this personally is that it might be. It's certainly fair game to put that issue out there, and any of the counselors could have done that. Counselor Jacobs did, speak a bit about this and about the issue of potential recusal. Didn't really come at it with a question, but the Justice Wolohojian did essentially answer the question not asked for the most part. And that's that, she has had a long history of being an appellate court judge. I mean, I think, at this point in the assessment process, we're not talking about someone with no experience as a judge. We're looking at a person that's probably the most qualified in the state. And it's not, unknown. It's very well known. We know the number of cases she's been before, 2,700. We know the number of opinions she's written, 900. We know that the number that she's been overturned on is remarkably low, 2 or 3, is what she testified to in the hearing. There's a mechanism for the judge's recusal, and that is Justice Wolohojian, she'll be able to recuse herself on her own regard, but there's also another process. A motion can be submitted. Judge Wolohojian would rule on that, but then there's a secondary step. The rest of the justices could then further review that recusal motion if it was denied. So there is history beyond just the procedure in place regarding potential recusal, and that's her own behavior, her own recusal of herself when she was an appellate court justice, when then Attorney General Healey or Assistant Attorney General Healey was prosecuting. There is a history of her recusing herself. That's an assessment, really, Katie, that needs to be made by the justice, because she's the one, more than anyone on the planet, that knows whether she can be unbiased and fair in exercising her judgment in the case.
And that's what she said, essentially, in the hearing, that she'd handle, cases as they come up on a case-by-case basis. I do want to roll a clip we have of one of the governor's counselors, Terrence Kennedy, talking about how he sees the role of the council and what their job here is in a confirmation.
Our role is a very narrow one. It's to determine if the person who is sitting there is qualified for the position. There's no question, and no question in my mind, this nominee is qualified for that job, period. I have never asked a nominee anything about their personal life, and I never will.
So, Damien, what do you think there? Are there situations where the council should be looking at a potential judge, not just what's on their resume, but what happens outside the courtroom?
Sure, potentially. I mean, the judge's ability to carry herself and act reasonably and her temperament generally, as well as potentially distractions from personal life. I think those are things that might be raised. It's fair game to raise them if the counselor feels that that's the appropriate step to take. Remember, the counselors are elected officials. There are 8 of them across the state, 8 positions. And so, there's a democratic process to ensure each of those counselors is the right fit for that particular district. And then that counselor has to exercise their best judgment. What question should I be asking here? That particular counselor explained his perspective, but other counselors might have come from a different point of view, might have different thoughts on it. But all of that's fair game to put out there in the world. What's different, I think, about this nomination in regards to her personal life is that it was really out there because there's so much reaction in the community, right? As soon as this news was out there in the media, there was a lot of reaction from different outlets. And so the issue had already sort of been thought about probably to a fair extent by all those interested in this, including the media. I think it's fair generally to consider issues like that. But at the end of the day, isn't the judges or the governor's job and the council's job to find the candidate that is the most qualified, that's going to do the best for the state, and consider all these other ancillary factors as well, but to weight them accordingly?
Great. And this is an election year. All 8 of those council seats are going to be on the ballot. There are 7 members currently serving 1 vacancy. And, when we in the media talk about the governor's council, we often call it an obscure state panel. Gin, why is this such an obscure body, given that we vote on them every 2 years and they meet pretty much weekly?
And they make $36,000 a year on top of that. It's an archaic holdover from colonial Massachusetts times. And if you kind of look back over the last really 100 years, the governor's council has had quite a bad reputation. There was back in the 60s, there were accusations of, them basically selling their duties. I believe 4 out of the 8 were actually charged. Governor Michael Dukakis actually came in, with that reformer impulse, and he set up the current system we have now, generally speaking, of the Judicial Nominating Commission, basically having a separate set of advisors who vet these nominees, who then put them forward to the governor, lieutenant governor, and then that nominee goes to the governor's council. If you want to go back, a decade, one of the current council members, Marilyn Devaney, she was charged or accused of throwing a curling iron at someone. And then she subpoenaed a reporter as an act of intimidation during the as it played out in court. So if you look at the broad scope historically, both in over the last 100 years and even in more recent times, the governor's council has had quite a terrible reputation.
Well, long history there, and something to think about as we come up on election season. Gin Dumcius, Damien Turco, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.